Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for the delay. Thank you for joining us today. If you're not an ATA member, please consider joining at atalink.org/become a member. Without a further delay, I'm going to like now to introduce the chairman of the Airlift Tanker Association, General Retired Duncan McNabb, to kick off today's event.
Hello, everyone. Hope everyone is doing well and you and all your loved ones are happy and healthy. And hopefully a lot of you have also got some vaccines. Some of us older folks, we've already got them, and I know you all are getting some as well. So hopefully that is helping. And with a little help from COVID, we're going to be in good shape. Towards that, we have a real treat for you today. I thank you for bearing with us, but today you're going to hear from one of my favorite people, one of my heroes. And I would just say that General Robin Rand is somebody I got to know very well, especially kind of later in my career. He was always at the forefront. He's commanded at OSAN, commanded Southern Command, and the Air Southern Command, 12th Air Force, and then the Fighter Weapons School. And then as a 4-star, he had 2 4-star commands, one at Randolph as the ATC commander, and then later as the first commander of the Global Strike Command, and brought that all together, did a superb job. But where I saw him, and just really had great experience, was supporting him when he was the commander of the wing at Balad, the 332nd Expeditionary Wing during Iraqi freedom. And he did a superb job there, but I still remember sitting up on, they had a little deck on the top of the headquarters, and had a near beer and a cigar and watched the operation going on. And obviously the mobility world was a real lifeline for him, and he was always very appreciative of that. And I still remember some of the conversations we had, and it really did stick with me as we went. And later on, as he went through the different commands, especially as a 4-star, I had retired and I had taken over Arnold Air Society Silver Wings as the chairman of that. And many of you all know what that is, but that's not only primarily ROTC cadets that want to join the National Arnold Air Society, but it also Silver Wings, which was civilian folks that believe in national defense. And he came and was our keynote speaker, and just knocked them dead. Talked about leadership, talked about how important things were, how do you balance your life. And I'll tell you what, I loved listening to him talk about that. And the next year he just stopped by when we were doing our national convention, just stopped by, stuck his head in and spent another half an hour. And he didn't realize that he was, when I was going to step down, and actually as I was taking over Airlift Tanker Association, I asked him if he would be willing to do that and step up and become chairman of Arnold Air Society Silver Wings, which he is doing today, and doing just a superb job. The other thing that's just really noteworthy about him is when he did retire, along that same line, he loves to give back, he loves leadership, is he was selected to be the CEO of the Gary Sinise Foundation. And you all, many of you are familiar with that, but their vision, and as the chief executive officer, Robin shares the same vision as the chairman. This is in kind of how they talk about that. Mr. Gary Sinise, a foundation that is enduring, reliable, and worthy of the American public's trust, while providing vital support and services to our nation's defenders and their families who have served and sacrificed on behalf of our communities and country. And you think about all the things that he has done over his career, and then you think about how much he is giving back now and continue to do that. Again, a great American, great friend. And General Rand, over to you. Welcome.
Thank you, General McNabb. It's very humbling to hear people talk about you, especially you. Thank you very much. You're a dear friend and a mentor and a leader. Gang, sorry, I apologize. Flexibility is the key to air superiority, though, right? We did it. So Alex, thank you, my friend, for doing this. I see Gerald Johnson out there, sir, hello. I wish this could be live because I connect so much better with people, but, bless your hearts, and thank you for indulging me for the next 45 minutes or hour. I really, really, really appreciate this opportunity. I love talking about the topic we are going to discuss today, a little bit about leadership. It's my favorite topic. I wish I'd been a better leader, but I certainly love talking about it and passing on my lessons. And so that's kind of the theme today. Instead of me telling you how to be good leaders, I thought what I'd share with you is the things that I learned along the way, mostly from hard knocks. I've kind of come to the conclusion that in life you learn basically two primary ways. One is through just life experiences. You know, think about it. When you're a little child, we all probably put our hand on the stove once, the hot stove one time, didn't we? Even though we were told not to. And that burned us and we didn't do that again. And there's a lot of learning that goes on that way. The other way you can learn is the transfer of knowledge. People can sit down with you, share their experiences, mentor you, coach you, teach you, you can observe. And I've learned that that's probably the more preferable way to learn. And so today, what I want to do is share with you some of my experiences and some of my shortcomings. So the theme today is a few thoughts from an old guy. If I could do it all over again, how would I do it better? Where were my mistakes and how can I pass that on? So bear with me. I'm going to go through these fairly quickly. I'm a storyteller. My wife calls me a BSer. I'll let you all decide afterwards if it's a combination of both. I like to tell stories, and I'll share some of the stories that I have with you on leadership. Books have been written. We could spend countless hours on this topic, but we don't have time for that. I'll start off with this picture. I had such a marvelous career, gang, you know, and I came out of the academy in 1979 as a kind of a wise guy, pretty self-consumed, going to pilot training, and it was pretty much, you know, what's in it for me? You know, my focus was on me and what am I going to do after I get my wings and where am I going to go? And I didn't give a lot of thought about the bigger Air Force. But as I proceeded on this, what turned out to be a 40-year journey in the Air Force, somewhere along the line, I realized it's not about me. It's really about our mission. It's about the airmen we serve with. It's about the families who support that mission and us. And that's why I ended up continuing to serve for so long. And along the way, I had the opportunity to learn from some phenomenal airmen, young airmen. My first real leadership opportunity was as a captain when I got yanked out of the cockpit quite unexpectedly, dragging my heels, and sent to Bamberg, Germany as an air liaison officer with the 3rd Brigade, 1st Armored Division, 7th Corps in Germany. And I had about 20 young soldiers and airmen from the rank of privates up to E6s that worked with me. And they came from all walks and creeds and backgrounds, and they taught me a lot about leadership and the challenges that go with leadership. And I learned so much from them. And I think that was when I realized, you know, it really isn't about us. It's about, you know, what we can do and how we can help the mission and support those that we serve with. I want to brag on this picture. I'm not an airlifter. I'm not a tanker guy. So forgive me for that. But I had an opportunity later in my career to command where I had those organizations in my part of my command, first at the weapons school when we had the tanker and the C-130s, and then again when I was the wing commander of the 332nd Air Expeditionary Wing, the 777th Airlift Squadron, C-130s, doing a lot of intra-theater movement for us, and they were part of our wing. And this picture at the bottom left is a picture that was taken probably the most memorable but difficult, disturbing mission I ever had flown on in my life. And it was a mission where we were going around hopping from one location to another and picking up really nasty, mean insurgents who had been captured. And we were putting them on the back of the C-130 where we had to lay big sheets of plastic down there. And you can see the 2 defenders in the front and then the air crew. And that's when I don't know that I've ever been closer to evil than I was that day. And you could smell it, you could feel it, it was in the air. And Look at the two crew chiefs or the two load masters. Look at the sweat. It was 100. It was in August. It was 115, 120. We're all dry. We're up in the cockpit, you know. But look at those load masters. They're drenched. But their attitude was so positive, and I just remember going, how can you be? And look at these two defenders down there who literally had to be around this evil. And it dawned on me once again, what we ask of our young men and women to do. And how thankless it is. And how that mission, no one was ever going to tell them thanks for it. And it certainly wasn't one that they really had trained for, by the way. It's not what we expect out of C-130 crews, is to go put evil people in the back end of your aircraft and deliver them. Very memorable, very memorable. The picture bottom right of that is of my son-in-law. That's Matt Robinson. He doesn't mind that I talk about him. He got used to it. He's a 2003 grad from the academy. He was a first lieutenant then. He was flying with the 3rd but 1st Squadron C-5s at the time out of Dover when I was in Iraq. That squadron later converted to C-17s, and then he flew them and then went down to Charleston, flew C-17s, and then did an exchange and went over and flew tankers at Kadena. And now he's back at Al-Udeid. He's the 379th EOSS commander. And he just landed. I just texted him and told him I was going to be telling tall tales to the ATA today. And he had just landed from a mission where he was out doing our nation's business in the AOR. I'm real proud of Matt. But that picture was taken sometime in the middle of a night. I just finished about a 6-hour Viper sortie. And literally, my command chief at the base, at the foot of the ladder was standing there. And that's not necessarily a good thing, because sometimes he's been at the foot of my ladder in a really bad case, you know, to say, hey, boss, we just lost an airman, or we just had something really bad happen. But this time was pretty cool. So I get out of the airplane, unstrap, and I climb down the ladder, and out pops Matt, who had just flown in on a C-5 sortie to Balad. And we were able to spend a couple hours together. And I remember taking him to my hooch, and we called my daughter, his wife, and my wife, who were together at the time. And I said, you know, one day I'm going to show that picture to his children, to our grandchildren, say that's what your granddad and dad were doing. Next picture. Slide. So if I could have it to do all over again, gang, ride with me for a few minutes. And Alex, are you full? There you go. I think the first thing, team, I would do is be more bold. I would have led more boldly. You know, the one thing that our airmen in any organization expect, there's really one thing they want more than anything else. We can't always pay our subordinates enough. We can't always give them the best and the greatest, but they do want us to be worthy. They want to be well led. And sometimes to lead well, you got to lead boldly. That's what they want. And I wasn't always leading boldly. I'm sure many times in my career, again, the focus was on me when it really needed to be on the people that I was leading. Cool picture, cool story. That's a young lieutenant. It was my last combat mission that I'd flown in Iraq that year at the end of about 13 months. He's a pretty cocky guy, isn't he? Young lieutenant. When we finished, I went over to him. It had been a pretty gnarly mission. I didn't think I was going to be my last, but I went up to him and I said, you know, I hope you have half the career I've had, partner. I'm calling it quits, man. An old guy and a young lieutenant just flew in some really terribly low weather and delivered some justice that day. And it just felt like with a week left on my tour, it was the right way to stop. He went on and has done some wonderful things. Picture to the right of that is with my little team that I had as I was rounding out my career at Air Force Global Strike. There's my enlisted aide, David, my exec, Kristen, who's now group commander at Minot in the missile wing. My aide de camp, Ashley, who was enlisted before she got her commission and did 6 combat tours as a defender. And my driver, Nate the Skate, I called him. They were really loyal to me. General McNabb knows what that's like when you have that team. That picture was taken late April, early May of 2018. I was about 2 months from retired, and I want to make one more trip to the AOR, and Ashley and I hopped on an airplane that next hour, and we went to Al Udeid. And I spent, because I had our bomber guys were there, and I wanted to spend some time with them. And I actually jumped in and did a 10.5-hour combat sortie in the B1 that week. And I just reflect back on that as I was rounding out a 40-year career, you know, the opportunity to lead men and women. And I just had reflected, I wish through that whole career I'd done it better and more boldly. Next. Like these two did. Katie is that major with the service dress on, and she was a bold leader, let me tell you. I met her when I was a wing commander at Luke Air Force Base, and she was a young lieutenant, and she was our assistant flight commander of one of our sortie generation squadrons at Luke. We had 206 F-16s there at the time. She was a sharp young officer and a fine maintenance officer. But I left from Luke and went directly to Balad, and about 2 or 3 months into the tour, I got a call from her squadron commander. And he said, "Hey, sir, I saw that you have a one ad, you know, for a protocol officer." He goes, "I got the perfect protocol officer for you." And I said, "Who's that, Walt?" And he goes, "Kate Stowe." And I go, "Kate Stowe, she's a maintenance officer." And he chuckled. He goes, "I know." I said, "And she's a lieutenant. Come on, man. I get people like General McNabb, you know, visiting me. We get DVs all the time. I can't have a lieutenant, untrained protocol officer. You're kidding me." And he gets quiet and he says, "Well, sir, I think she'll do a good job." And I go, "Walt, why would a maintenance officer want to come and run protocol?" And he told me, he said, "Sir, because she wants to get into the fight." So I folded like a cheap suit. Guess who came over and ran protocol? But she only did it for a month, because her first month, we had to make a pretty significant leadership change. One of the F-16 squadrons that were there, they were failing, and you can't fail in combat. It's no fail. And the maintenance officer and the senior NCO were failing. And I had to make a really, really difficult decision. And I told the maintenance group commander, "We got to make a change." Terrible thing to do. And if you change in combat, you're not going to get a replacement anytime soon. But we sent home that maintenance officer and senior NCO. And I went to my maintenance group commander and said, "TJ, do you know that my protocol officer has a background in the F-16? He goes, "No, sir, I didn't know that." I go, "Well, would you like her for a couple of weeks?" He goes, "Yes, sir." Well, do you think I ever saw her again after that? Negative. Here's the story, though, teammates. She went into a squadron she didn't know. She went into a bunch of airmen and NCOs that she had never served with. And all 5'4" of her 110 pounds. And she walked in and she said, "Hey, gang, get on my back. We're going to cross the finish line here." And within 24 hours, you could notice pep back in those airmen's steps. And within a week, that squadron was performing at a level that not only met standards, but exceeded standards. And they did it on the back of a young lieutenant who led boldly. It was probably the finest leadership I've seen in my career. So don't, lieutenants out there, don't let anyone kid you. Don't let anyone talk down to you. You took an oath to lead. Lead boldly. I already talked about Ashley. That lady deserves several medals. She wasn't only my aide de camp, but she had to endure me for 26 months because I didn't want to swap out aide de camps my last year. So she ran to the finish line with me, and she did the math, and it was some ridiculous number in our 2 years we were deployed or TDY on travel on the road 350 days of those last 2 years. And she had a young son at the time, didn't complain. But I already told you before that, she was a defender before she was commissioned. She's been shot at and she shot back. She leads boldly. Next. Here's something I want y'all to think about. I wish I'd seen this slide a lot earlier in my career, but in the late 40s, as we were in a very new Air Force, a manual was published called 3515. It's called the art of, it was a leadership manual. I want you to look at, we did a word search. I had a young lady named Colonel Dee Dee Hatfield that worked for me, and she did a lead word search. And in 1948, here's some of the words. It was a small little pamphlet. I've seen it. It couldn't have been more than 20 pages on leading. Here was some of the words that popped up in this word search out of this manual. Just take a minute and look at them. Feeling, confidence, fear, kindness. Look at the word love. In this manual, 13 times the word love showed up. Don't get wrapped up around the axle on the context. It might have been love of nation, love of airmen, love of whatever, your family, but it showed up 13 different times. Think about the authors of this manual in 1948. What did they have in common? We were a new Air Force with 1 year under our belt, and the vast majority of them had served in World War II, where over 55,000 airmen had been killed over the skies of Europe and the Pacific. These were hardcore dudes, okay? And this is some of the things they thought were important. We did a revision of it and we renamed it Air Force DD 1-1. It's a big, thick manual, and I don't know if it's been re-edited or not. It hadn't when I had left. In 2011, look at the word search, what we found. So here's what I witnessed in my career. I witnessed an Air Force that became very process-oriented. And I'm going to be candid. We overmanaged and we over-centralized how we led. And we gave way too much control to staffs, and we neutered our commanders and our senior NCOs. Leading is two parts, King. It's process, it's up here, but it's also here. And I would submit that we need to get more of the leadership back in here in our heart. That's your challenge. I'm gone. I should have done better. I should have been more forthright. I should have jumped up and down on tabletops. But that's what I want your generation to spend more time. You young NCOs out there, you young field grade officers, you squadron commanders, man. Two parts, head and heart. I know General Goldfein, as I was leaving, was trying to spend a lot of time putting authority back into the squadron level. Bless his heart. He had a lot of obstacles, invisible obstacles to knock down, but love wasn't even in there. I want to leave you with this thought. One of my favorite people to study was a guy by the name of Vince Lombardi. He was a coach for the Green Bay Packers. He was a dang good coach too. He was tough. And he said this, he goes, you know, I don't have to like my players, but I got to love them. And my love will be relentless. Take the word player out and put airman in there. It's all right to love your airmen. Okay, next. There you go, next. So, when I first joined the Air Force, we didn't have core values. They maybe were implied. I'm not saying we were core valueless, but we didn't have stated core values. These core values didn't come along until we were faced with some real low moments of tragedy in our Air Force. It was in the early 90s, after Desert Storm. General Ron Fogelman was the chief of staff. We had some real bad incidents happening. We had a fratricide where we shot down a helicopter with friendlies on it. We had an F-15 crash on takeoff and the pilot was killed. We had some incidents at Minot that were going on with a young lieutenant. General Fogelman, instead of yelling and screaming and jumping up and down, him and Chief Benkin said at the time, we're going to do something about it. We're going to get back to the basics. And under their watch, they came out with 3 stated core values. General McNabb, you remember those when that happened? It wasn't force fed. It wasn't like a fire hydrant we had to drink out of. It was just, gang, we got to get back to the basics. Integrity, service, and excellence. Wow. We don't need a 4th core value. We don't need 20 core values. If we adhere to these core values, and perfection isn't one of them, by the way, nor should it be. It's excellence. In the days we're not excellent, that's okay. We come back to work the next day and we strive a little harder. You want to get after dignity and respect and inclusion. You want to get after the issues with suicide. You want to get after the issues of discrimination, assaults. It's if you live by our core values and you preach those and you live by those and you accept the examples, we will get after these vexing challenges we face, because it's incompatible to have some of these challenges if we are people of integrity, if we have service before self, and we strive for excellence. Airmen aren't going to hurt airmen if they're striving for excellence. Next. You know, gang, it's hard sometimes for all of us, wherever you are. The one thing that I love about my Air Force is that because we had core values and because of who we are, I could blindly trust the person to my left and my right, even if I didn't know them. I always trusted my airmen. If they told me they were going to do something, I believed them. I didn't try to micromanage them. I didn't try to follow back up. I just believed them. I used to say at Balad, if mortars were coming in, I was on the stage, I know a bunch of airmen would rush up and throw me on the ground and lay on top of me, and they wouldn't even know me. I knew I could leave my wallet sitting on the floor of the gym or something, and someone would pick it up and find me and return it to me. Because we have trust. But the one way to violate trust is to willfully do what? Violate our standards. We make mistakes. And sometimes as a leader, I didn't always maintain the standards or enforce those as well as I should have. And that's regrettable, because ultimately when you don't, what do you violate? Trust. And when we lose trust in each other, boy, oh boy, gang, the ship has sailed. I learned the hard way. That picture was taken after we had 3 airmen, a tech sergeant, senior airman, and airman first class. For what it is worth, 2 males and a female. EOD specialists who were killed on a Sunday morning. And the reason they were killed is they willfully violated known procedures and standards. And had they complied with standards, they'd have been alive. And it was devastating to that unit, and it was devastating to everyone involved. But it also put a big hole in the coverage. We were there to support for our soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines that were engaged in ground combat. And we let them down because we didn't have 3 people to backfill for several weeks. Gang, you got to enforce and maintain standards. When you don't, bad things happen. Next. Next slide there, Alex. Thank you. You know, one of the things, my Air Force changed. You know, people ask me what it was like, and really, you know, spending 40 years, I spanned a pretty chunk of generations. And what I came into, which was largely a mostly white male organization, to what it had become by the time I retired was a lot different. And regrettably, we got there the hard way. We're not where we should be. Thank God we're not where we were. We're still grinding and moving out. But one of the things that I'm sure that I sometimes did was I'd look the other way. I'd see something that was wrong, know it was wrong, and I didn't do as good as I should have done to change it. And one of the things is to ensure that all our airmen, regardless of their gender, their religious preference, their orientation, their color, is that every airman is treated with dignity and respect. And we owe that. And when it's not there, we should be the first to step in front of the line and say, stop it. Not on my watch. Not on my watch. That young lady taking a picture in my office was from Guam. Her name was, we called her Chris. And at the time she was a chef. She didn't like to be called a cook. She was a 19-year-old chef on the missile fields of Malmstrom. She made the best tater tots I've ever eaten in my life. She came to Guam. She said, sir, I had the greatest life. I had two sisters, my mom and dad, and we lived on a ranch in Guam. We didn't have running water necessarily. We had outdoor, facilities, but it was great. We fished, we hunted. And when I was 12, my father passed away. My life took a big change. My mom and my sisters all came to the United States. We had to start over and find our way. She had a sister who joined the Marine Corps, a sister joined the Army, and she joined the Air Force. When she was 19, she married another 19-year-old who was a bomb loader. Two 19-year-olds when I met her. And I said, Lord, have mercy. But she has overcome so much, and I don't know where Chris is today. I know she probably has a few more stripes on her arms if she's still in the Air Force. But that young lady deserves our dignity and respect. And next to her was now Chief Master Sergeant Tess Fontaine, who was a military training instructor when I first met her. She's now going to become the group superintendent at Kirtland of the Mission Support Group. Tessa's deployed in combat 3 times, and she was one of the finest military training instructors our Air Force has ever had when we were coming out of a black hole from what had gone on at our basic military training. And I would match her up against any senior NCO I've ever served with in my entire career. Treat your airmen with dignity and respect, gang. And we won't have to have these down days that are being mandated by the Secretary of Defense, okay, about extremist behavior within the military. Next. Boy, oh boy, I don't want to lecture y'all, but to me, the most sacred word that I can use to share my love for a fellow airman is to call him my wingman, or to be their wingman. But later in my career, that word got overused, and it got used, I think, in a way that lost a lot of our airmen's, understanding, because we started going, let's have a wingman day. And every time we had a wingman day, it was always a connotation with something bad going on. Too many suicides, too much of this, too much of that. And airmen would roll their head, and it's unfortunate. In the Army, their term for each other of endearment is battle buddy. In the Navy, it's shipmate. In the Marine Corps, it's simply Marine or devil dog. And our term is wingman. And it's born out of someone's blood, sweat, and tears. And you ask a lot of young airmen, where's the term wingman come from? They don't even know. I don't know that it's necessarily something that's written anywhere, but it's out of blood, sweat, and tears from those who went before us. from the P-51s who put external tanks on their aircraft to escort those B-17s so they could get them all the way to the target area and back home to reduce the unacceptable 30% attrition rate our bombers were facing in World War II when they didn't have escort. The little jets or the little planes were what? Wingmen for the big planes. It's born out of blood, sweat, and tears. And I just wish earlier in my career I had fostered that environment in the organizations that I serve with. Next, learn from me, foster that. One of the things that I really wish I'd done better at as a younger man especially was read more and understood our history. I call myself now an amateur historian, and that's all I am. But I realized something, that you learn a lot from your history. And the old saying, if you don't know your history, you can tend to repeat it. But I think there's something even more important than knowing your history. I think it's knowing your heritage. History might make you smarter, but your heritage will make you prouder. Do you know your heritage, guys and gals? Do you know the heritage of the airlift and tanker business? Look at that picture in the bottom left. Can you see it? It was taken in February or March of 1973. You know who they are? Some of those guys in that picture had just endured 7 years of imprisonment in Hanoi. Who brought them home? Who brought them home? The C-141 crew brought them home. That guys, I gotta believe those guys were scared. When they landed in Hanoi, I'm not 100% sure they weren't wondering, is this some joke, man? And we're gonna lift off, and what's gonna whack us? Some SA-7 at the end of the runway. Your heritage is such a vital part of our Air Force. And I could go around and I could tell a story about every one of those pictures in there. And if you understood what these guys and gals did, you couldn't help but be proud to wear the same uniform that they wore. And it would instill in you a desire to not to want to let them down, and a desire to live by those three values of integrity, service, and excellence. I promise you that. Learn your heritage. Teach it to your airmen. It will make us a better mission capable service. Next. There's our heritage. When I was the ATC commander, I had the honor to meet this guy. He was the co-pilot on that airplane you saw in the upper left corner of a B-25 on April 18th, 1942, that took off on the USS Hornet. His name was Lieutenant Colonel Dick Cole. He was Jimmy Doolittle's co-pilot. Dick was the last surviving Doolittle Raider out of the 80 that we had. I attended Dick's memorial service, gosh, 2 years ago, but Dick lived to be 101 and some change. He honored me. He came to my retirement game. When he was 100, he went and renewed his driver's license, for gosh sakes. And he had a new F-150 pickup truck. He was the kindest, sweetest fella. But you know what people don't know about Dick after that mission? He flew the Burma hump, man, for 2.5 more years. He was one of you. And he was also one of the first to do special ops business. He fought 3 wars basically all in one. A bomber, an airlifter, and a special operator. Did you know that? Study your history. Study your legacy. Next. One of the things I told you, I was kind of a cocky, self-centered guy. But I'll tell you, man, hard knocks. Life teaches you humility. You're either going to learn to be, be humble, or you're going to learn it in this business. What I would suggest is you be humble to start with. And here's the simple way to be humble. Deflect credit to others when things go well and accept responsibility when things need fixing. Too many letters, too many phone calls, too many tears not to learn humility in this business. Next. I think 3 powerful words that I learned as a leader that I wish I had learned earlier, and it's back to this humility. 3 powerful words. I am sorry. When you make a mistake, own it and admit it. Now, as leaders, we don't want to make a lot of mistakes because that damages your credibility. But there's something worse than making mistakes, and that is not admitting them. And those airmen out there are smart, man. And they ain't stupid when they see you. And if you do something that you shouldn't have, just own it. That picture was taken about 2 weeks after I assumed command of AETC, and we were in a bad place at the time. We had really just started digging our way out of this terrible scandal that had occurred at BMT. So one of my first things I wanted to do was go out and just really wrap my arms around the whole BMT mission and certainly spend time with our military training instructors. So I went out and I was the presiding officer of a Bmt graduation that we did every Friday. And it impressed me so much. And after the ceremony, I asked for the NCOs, the TIs that were part of that, could I meet with them behind the platform and just thank them? And they did. They followed orders and they were all there. And I said, guys, I'm so impressed. Could I ask a favor? Could I have my picture taken with you? And they said, yes, sir, we'd love to. But now look at them. Not until you fix your hat, though, General. See, I'd spent 37 years at that point wearing that cool fighter pilot crush in my hat. Now, there's no regulation that really says you can or can't do it, but it isn't what we teach our airmen to do. So I had a dilemma. I could have said, hey, do you know who you're talking to? I'm the commander of AETC. I wear my hat this way. So do a lot of other people. Or I could let them do what? Fix my hat. And I thought about it. It's a small, funny story, actually, but I thought about it. I said, this is what they teach. I expect them to adhere to standards. Who am I not to abide by the standards we teach our airmen? Small point, but guess what? I spent 4.5 more years in the Air Force after that. I never wore my hat that way again because I was wrong. I wish I'd been that way as a lieutenant or captain or major or lieutenant colonel. And that's a minor thing. I made some whoppers, man, big mistakes. And I needed to own them better. So leaders out there, try not to make mistakes, but you're gonna. When you do, I am sorry. Next. Vulnerability. I'll go faster because I want some Q&A. We gravitate as leaders to the things we're comfortable with. Whatever you are, you all have skills. I don't care if you're a young airman, NCO, lieutenant, whatever. You gravitate to what you're comfortable with. But to be an effective leader, you got to stretch your limits. And to stretch your limits, you got to be willing to be vulnerable. And gang, vulnerability is what will make you better because you need to be a leader for everyone. I'm going to tell this quick story. Balad, we were running a lot of people through the theater hospital we had there that was part of the 332nd. We were doing over 2,000 surgical procedures a month at the height of that surge in 2007. And it was awful. And I didn't like going to the hospital because it always would leave me a little offset. It would kind of take me off my game. It really would. I'd leave there and I'd feel off and I go, I got 7,000, 8,000 airmen scattered over 45 locations. I need to be on. Every Friday I'd have to go have a dinner at one of the DFACs with my Army counterpart. And on the way back from the DFAC, I'd drive right by the hospital. And I'd go, tonight I'm not going to stop there. I don't have the energy. I'm going to just go back to my hooch and rest. And I get right to that place where you keep driving or you make a right turn to go into the parking lot. And at the last minute, I'd always turn into the parking lot and go hang out in the hospital. And it'd leave me offset and it stretched my limits and I didn't feel good about it, but I did it. Well, here I am, 15 years later, being part of a nonprofit organization that is consumed with trying to help our defenders, our veterans, our first responders and their families who are dealing with the vexing challenges of invisible wounds, visible wounds, you name it. And I now realize where I got that epiphany from in my heart and what changed me. And it's because I was vulnerable and I stretched my limits. Next. Communicate. You leaders out there, it's expected of you. Your airmen want transparency and they want honesty. And I wasn't always a good communicator. But worse, next slide. Not only wasn't I a good communicator, I was a crappy listener. I remember I could finish sentences before people could even finish them themselves. I knew what I wanted to hear. I knew what I wanted done. And it was very dismissive of the people that I was spending time with. My wife will tell you I'm not a good listener. It's still a failure. It's a true shortcoming that I have. I need to be a better listener. You all do. Your airmen want to be heard. And that's where you're going to get innovation from. And that's how we're going to get better. You don't have all the answers. And your way ain't the only way. That's my grandson, Eli. That picture was taken on Thanksgiving. I was in Iraq and he was in Dover, Delaware. I'd waited all day to call, and so I got back to my hooch late at night and I called, and first thing they do is give him the phone, and I go, "Hi, Eli," and he goes, "Hi, Baba." That's what he calls me. I go, "I love you." He goes, "I love you, Baba." He could talk, man, for a 2.5-year-old. I go, "Happy Thanksgiving," and he went, "Happy Thanksgiving, Baba." Click, and he hung up on me, man. And I tried calling back and I couldn't get through, and I said, "That little rascal, he's a terrible listener. He was 2.5. What excuse do I have? Learn to listen better." Here's why. Next. Well, by the way, he's grown up now. He's 6'5". Next. If you listen and you walk with your airmen, you'll learn. You'll learn their stories, you'll learn what they're thinking, and you'll learn how to lead better. That's my friend Stevie Tyler. Stevie's now a tech sergeant. I knew him when he was a young airman weapons loader. He's now chaplain's assistant. He's got a master's degree in counseling. Stevie taught me a lot about what I need to learn as a commander. Next. This will probably be my last story. I wish I'd laughed and smiled more, gang. It's therapeutic. I don't know if it's good or not. I'm not a heart doctor, but I do think that tears and laughter are good for your heart. We were being very indignant. That's my vice commander, my command chief, and we had this picture taken, and for some stupid reason, I thought it'd be funny if they swapped hats, the chief and the vice. The chief was a huge man, literally a huge man, a giant of a man, 6'5", 250, 260. The vice was a very fit, but 5'7", 150 pounds, soaking wet probably. could run like a deer. And they put each other's hats on, and I got the biggest chuckle out of that, as you can see, because the hat on Gary Renfro is falling around his ears. That picture was taken, and there was an airman about 10 feet away looking at us. He was the guy who checked ID cards at the headquarters as you walked into the building. Didn't think much of it, but a few years later, I ran into that airman. He was a second lieutenant going through introduction to flight training at Pueblo, Colorado. That was part of AETC at the time. After I gave a speech or whatever I did, he comes up to me and said, "Sir, you probably don't remember me, but we served together in Iraq." And gang, I'd be honest, if I had a quarter for every time someone said that to me, I'd be pretty wealthy. I said, "I don't, son. What'd you do over there?" And he said, I sat at the headquarters and checked ID cards. And I said, "I actually do remember you." And he said, "Sir, I got this memory of you. It's about hats." And I said, "You know, that's funny because I got a picture of that." I said, "I've always wanted to ask, what did you think of that when you saw us doing something irreverent?" And he looked at me, gang, and he said, "Sir, it was good to see that our leaders could laugh." The rest of the story is that picture was taken about 20 minutes after we had just returned from a memorial service where we had 2 OSI agents who had been killed. And it was the 5th memorial service I had gone in 3 weeks. And it was probably the 18th or 20th that I'd gone that year I was the commander. And it was at the height of the surge, and we were having a lot of fatalities and casualties. And gang, I was starting to get skittish. I was rounding out my year there, and I was starting to lose my way. What did he say? He said, "It's good to see that our leaders could laugh." Next. Like this guy, Chief Tapia. Don't look at him, look at the people behind him. I don't know what he said, I don't know what he was doing, but look at that. He made those 3 airmen feel good that day. Next. Balance. We could have spent the whole time on that. I wish I had been more balanced. Next. Okay, bye, honey. My wife said she's leaving. So they say there are no do-overs in life. Maybe General Johnson will agree or not, but I think there are. There's one. Grandchildren. It's God's way of giving you a second chance after you messed it up as the first go around. Next. So here we go, gang. We're rounding it out. Could I do it over again? If I could, would I do it differently? Yep. Would I have applied some of the things I'm sharing with you? I would hope so. I would do it earlier. I'd be a better listener. I would be a more astute observer, and I would have tried. But here's the deal. I'd do it over again. You are performing noble duties for our country. I bask in your service every day. I'm sitting here in Eagle, Colorado. I might go ski a couple hours this afternoon because of what you do for me, for my family, for our nation. It's really an honor to have been one of your wingmen and teammates, and I'd have done it again. So with that, next slide. Your turn. I don't think I missed anything. As far as the brunt of what you do for our nation there, is you help deliver air superiority, air and space superiority.
Well, General,
So,
I'd
Alex,
say,
over to you, partner.
Yeah, I'd say you're still one of our wingmen, and you always will be one of our wingmen. So thank you so much for joining us today. We do have some questions, answers. We did get a late start. Is there anything on your schedule behind this that you need to be?
No, sir. I'm
All
all
right.
yours as long as you want me.
All right. Well, don't say that. We'll be here all day. But the first
Nope,
question we had
people
was
can check out whenever they want.
Yeah, that's all right. We have an anonymous question. It says, how do we work to improve the relationship between young mobility forces and the tactical air forces? Once folks become senior officers, they seem to get it, but the young officers still see an us versus them Air Force. How do we fix that?
That's a great question. Whoever asked it, thank you. So knowing your heritage and history is really important. And the earlier you know that, then it becomes less of me, okay, and more of others. And you're right. One of the strengths, so let's make it a positive instead of a negative at first. One of our strengths is that we are kind of tribal, aren't we? We all come into the Air Force as something. We all say we're airmen first, okay? We are, but we come in and we fall into our tribe, whether it's the flying tribe, whether it's the fighter pilot tribe, the airlift tribe, whether it's the bomber tribe, whether it's the maintenance crowd, whether it's the security forces, you know, we all fall in. And it's okay. And we feel proud of who we are because there's a lot of lineage and heritage associated with that. Here's where it becomes counterproductive, is when we actually start being so tribal that we no longer learn about each other, that we are no longer sharing lessons, and we become demeaning and put each other down. And the way it starts, it has to start early on, okay? Early on. And it's not just between mobility and tactical. When I went to Air Force Global Strike Command, I've told this story many, many times. What struck me, I had 3 observations. I was parachuted in, like General Fogelman was parachuted into AIMS, to MAC and Transcom back in the day. I was parachuted in to Air Force Global Strike, and an ICBM and a missile or a bomber community. And I had 3 observations. One is we had airmen who were good as any airman around the world. The other thing that I noticed right off the bat, I never was in organizations that were more tribal and less communicated and more stovepiped than what existed between security forces, missileers, bomber crews, and maintainers. I'd never seen anything, and it was so counterproductive. And the third observation was they lack swag. So we went about it, but it has to start. And it's not just between aviators. When I was a wing commander, trying to get aviators with maintainers and support officers in the company grade officer councils was like twisting arms. Okay, and it just really roll up your sleeves. But lieutenants, aviators out there, the sooner you learn about your counterparts, the better you're going to be if you ever want to be a good squadron commander. Because when you become a squadron commander, you're going to have to know who's going to come fix the air conditioner in your dorms. You're going to have to know a little bit about the challenges of those maintainers that are fixing your airplanes for you. You're going to have to know about the medics who are out there making sure that your air crews are able to do their job and take care of your families. And if you don't learn that until you're an 05 squadron commander, you're late to need, partner. But oh no, it's not cool enough, man, because I'm too caught up in my own little world. So I say, learn from me. Stop being so caught up in your own little world. Service before self, be humble, and learn about what it takes. It takes every single person in our Air Force to make us who we are. And will it, man? Great question out there, bud. Thanks for asking it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more too, General. I had the privilege of serving as the Mission Support Group exec at MacDill while I was the KC-135 pilot down there. And what I learned in that job made me much more successful as a squadron commander, and I was so grateful to have that opportunity. The next question relates on that a little bit, talking about the weapons school has grown to include multiple mobility and ISR platforms. How has that affected the capability of the school and the graduates?
Great question. So I don't know, because I'm dated. Okay, I was the commandant on the weapons school from 2001 to 2003. I went through the weapons school in very late 80s, early 1990. I came back as an instructor, and then I came back as the commandant. But here's what I'll tell you. When I went through as a student, it was the fighter weapons school. When I came back as an instructor, as Major Rand, as the ops officer of the F-16 division, later squadron, it became the United States Air Force Weapons School. And when I came back as the commandant, I was the commandant when we brought in the soft division squadron. We brought in the B-2, and we were growing. We'd already had the tanker and at the time C-130 squadron. And here's what I say. Everything we have done has made that culture of those tribes better and more lethal. So I am so over this idea of expansion is bad. It's been good. Every community has gotten better after they become part of the weapons school. Every community has gotten better. And I will tell you, at the operational level, we are far more lethal than we ever were before we expanded the weapons school. Because in the early days, the weapons school focused on tactics, tactical employment. That's still a big part of the weapons school, but it has made operational level of warfare so much more efficient in how we do business. And that's what component commanders care about. That's what CFACs care about. Okay. And that's what combatant commanders care about. And we're a better Air Force and Space Force because of what our weapons school has grown to be. So I don't know if I answered the question, but I think it's only gotten tougher. I probably couldn't graduate from the weapons school today. I'm not smart enough or good enough. It's only gotten tougher and harder. And all you patch wearers out there, congratulations. Kick ass, take names, man. I'm proud of you. That's the reason, one of the reasons, not the only reason, one of the reasons we're the greatest Air Force in the world. Unmatched by any other Air Force. There is no other Air Force that has the equivalent of our United States Air Force Weapons School. Don't get me started on that one, Alex.
All right, I won't, General. But I tell you, your lead boldly comments really resonated with me. I mean, that's one of the things that I teach and talk to all of our students up here at the Naval War College about on a daily basis is you need to lead boldly. Do what's right for your airmen, your sailors, your Marines, not what's right for your career. Do what's right for the mission. And you talked also about getting the power back from the staffs to the commanders. General Goldfein worked so hard on this and made some good progress, but how do we get the ball over the goal line? How do we get that power back where it belongs with the people that know what they need to do and just get frustrated all the time because they can't do it?
Yeah, well, number one is you recognize how it happened and why it happened. And I'll give you my philosophy is it happened because when I came in the Air Force in 1979, we were about 700,000 smart people on active duty. Forget about the Guard and Reserve for a minute. That was just the active duty force. As I stepped off, we were cut down to about 322,000 active duty airmen. You know, the total force with civilians, Guard, Reserve, and active duty were, you guys know the numbers, but it's half of what it was over those 40 years. A lot of reasons for that. Some of that, though, one of the reasons was because of we couldn't afford it to be the Air Force that we were going to be. We got smaller. As we got smaller, we started micromanaging and we started putting everything in AFIs and again, try to drive efficiency. and it became this insidious thing that happened. And what we ended up doing is over managing and over centralizing. And then guys like this chief you just put up on the picture, and senior NCOs and 05s just started managing, and they didn't feel they had the authority to do what was right. So here's what you got to do. Fight like hard. If you're going to have responsibility, we got to give you the authority. And authority has to match responsibility, and it wasn't. And I would just keep being professional, but keep driving that message home. And where you see that you don't have the authority, you need to bring it, squadron commanders and NCOs, to your leadership's table. In group commanders and wing commanders, you need to bring it to your MAJCOM commanders, and MAJCOM commanders need to go in and stand up for their commanders and NCOs and tell the staff sometimes, guess what? I don't work for you. I work for the Chief of Staff of the United States Air Force and the Secretary of the Air Force. And the last time I checked, most of you I outrank. So where there's stupid OIs and AFIs, bring it to the attention and get them changed, for gosh sakes. I wish I'd done more of that earlier. And so, you know, I'm picking at myself. You know, when I point at you out there, there's an old saying, one finger pointing at you, look how many are pointing back at me though. 3. I'm pointing back at myself. And I should have been more expressive where I saw those areas where we were being, you know, when I was a 3-star and we went into sequestration, I couldn't even approve my own TDYs. There was a period where I had to go to the MAJCOM commander because to approve if I was going to be able to travel. Ridiculous. Sorry.
No, don't be sorry. I mean, that's just what our young leaders and our airmen need to hear. You know, if it's legal, it's moral, and it makes common sense, find out who the waiver authority is, or change the regulation, or find out who could accept the risk of violating the reg. And you know, to hear
Alex,
that from you is
just
great.
One word of caution. Here's the challenge, though, that you all face, and I don't want to blow sunshine, but there's one thing to be what I just said, be professional about. But the worst thing that can happen with our leaders at whatever level is to become cynical. Cynicism is terrible. Don't become cynical. I know sometimes it's frustrating. I know sometimes you're discouraged and you're beat down. But when that turns into cynicism, the game's over, man. Because then you quit and your airmen see it. Somehow go home, recharge, do whatever it takes, but don't lose your way, and count your victories. And sometimes you're going to get some, you win some and you lose some, but don't let that frustration turn into cynicism. That's something that I would hope that maybe that would be one of those lessons learned I'd put up there. Cynicism is not good. It's unhealthy.
Totally understand. Been there. You know, we've all had those days. It's frustrating. You get up the next day and you go back and you keep fighting, and you keep fighting for your airmen and the mission and what you know is right, and the cynicism stays back. So appreciate that so much.
And again, Alex, to that point, here's what I learned to do. Sometimes you can't solve world hunger. You can't find a cure for cancer. You can't fix all the ails of a big bureaucratic ship. Institutions don't have feelings. Institutions are institutions. Leaders have feelings, have emotions. I learned this. It's a short story. I learned this is powerful. That big, huge command chief I told you about. One day we were meeting with a tech sergeant, and she was running what was called the 5-6 group, and she was very frustrated because she said to me and the chief, she goes, you know, I can't get people to volunteer. It's always the same people that jump on board. Very small. I can't get people energized to want to do anything. I'm so frustrated. And you could see she was almost in tears. And I just sat back and I listened, and she goes, what can I do to get more people involved? And with all the wisdom of 27 years in the United States Air Force, my command chief looked at her and he says, what can you do? I'm going to tell you. And he held up a finger. He says, you can make a difference. One airman at a time. That's what you can do. And gang, I listened to that. And the rest of my career, I said, you know, sometimes I maybe can't do everything I wanted to do. I fell short. I missed a mark. But you can do something one airman, one family, one day at a time. And that will prevent you from getting cynical. So.
Excellent. So just to parlay off of that for our last question, before I give it to you for your closing remarks, you know, you talked about the core values. The core values are why I joined the Air Force. I wanted to be part of something like that. Clearly, you share that same mantra. Can you talk about what attracted you to the nonprofit sector, and specifically the Gary Sinise Foundation? I think, you know, seeing and talking to you, I think it was those shared core values and making a difference one person at a time, and not, you know, not just leaving and going to the corporate sector and things like that. But can you talk about that transition from
Sure.
service to civilian service?
Yeah, you know, for me, when you spend the better part of your life and you think that you're serving, and I would always be asked why I joined the Air Force, and I said, you know, gang, it was so long ago, I don't remember, but the more important question isn't why I joined, why did I stay in? And that, I said, is a question you're all going to have to ask. The day's going to come. We all come in for different reasons. Maybe it's because you want to be part of a value-based organization. Maybe it's because your family joined the military and served. Maybe it's because you wanted a roof over your head, or you wanted security, or you wanted to work towards education. No reasons are better than another. But I guarantee you, a lot of the reasons we came in aren't the reasons we stay. And I used to say the reasons I stayed are crystal clear to me. Mission, I believe in the mission. I profoundly believe in the airmen who perform the mission and those families who support those airmen. But to answer your question succinctly, when I was a colonel at Kunsan Air Base as the wing commander of the Wolfpack, Gary Sinise brought his band over in 2004. And I met Gary then. And Gary and I stayed in touch largely because of him, not because of anything I did. And for the next 14 years, we stayed in touch. And as I was retiring and retired, I didn't listen to my mentors who said, take a few months and just decompress and relax. He asked me if I would come on and become the CEO of the Gary Sinise Foundation, the hat that he was wearing. And it's hard to say no to Gary. He's a very persuasive, passionate guy. But here was our mission statement. See how this sounds to you guys. The mission of the Gary Sinise Foundation is to help support defenders, which are active duty guard reserve, veterans, those who have worn the uniform, first responders, and their families. Well, what had I just concluded doing for 40 years? It was a natural fit. But here's what was interesting. Gary, we're celebrating our 10th anniversary of a foundation this year. We didn't have core values. Gary was a value-based guy, but there were no formal core values. And shortly after I came in, I said, let's get after that. I didn't mandate to him. I said, hey, I want you. Why do we need core values? What are they for? We put a team together, and guess what values they came up with? Integrity, service, commitment. So those are the three values that the Gary Sinise Foundation has. And I did not persuade them or force feed those. That's just what they came up with. So gang, you know, I don't want to overstate it. It's just, it's very humbling to be able to continue to serve in an organization that's value-based, that's trying to make a difference to folks like you and your families who stand in the gap for us. So it's just a real privilege and honor. I don't want to overstate it. But it fit kind of like a natural glove. And I don't know how long I'll do it. I have a board of directors and the chairman, but you know, it's been a blessing and a privilege to serve with those who deserve our time and effort. And the last thing I'll say about it is, you know, no offense, no knock on the government, but the demand far exceeds the supply, and the demands and the needs of our military, our veterans, and our first responders and our families cannot be supported by the government. We have to have organizations that are willing to get out there and get after these vexing challenges of homelessness amongst our veterans, suicide rates that are outrageously high, abuse, substance abuse challenges, dealing with the mental wellness challenges that so many of our veterans and first responders are facing. And we can't rely on the VA and certainly, the government to provide the support, all the support that's needed. So one day at a time, one veteran, one defender, one first responder at a time is my mantra, So thank you. That's find your why, gang. Find your why.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for your insight.
I'm sorry, Simon, but Simon Sinek said it better than any of us. Find your why. What's your why? It was easy for 40 years. My why was mission airman families. You got to find your why. Yeah. Now it's what I told you, and it's grandkids, and it's skiing, and it's golfing.
Excellent. Well, all right, sir. I'm going to turn it back over to you for your closing remarks before I give it to General Johnson to close us out for the day. But thank you so much for your time. And do you have any parting words for our audience?
Here's my parting words. I should have started with these, and if I didn't, I apologize. My parting words are thank you. I truly believe whoever's on this, whether it's civilians who are civic leaders, and I heard from one of my former civic leaders, Gray Bredwell, who I love dearly, from the good old city of Abilene, Texas, if Gray's out there. The support that you provide our families and our bases and what your communities do for us, whether it's retirees, whether it's our active duty Guard or Reserve, our airlifters and our tanker folks, whether it's our absolutely valued enlisted and our NCOs, whoever's out there, just thank you. You are the best that our country has to offer. You need to know that. And what you do is noble, noble, noble. And we've never needed you more. I know there are wolves howling out the door out there, man. And you're, as General McNabb told me one time, you're the sheepdogs. You are protecting the sheep from the wolves. You protect me, you protect my family. You keep us strong. Don't get cynical. Know that we love you. We appreciate you. Do me a favor, wherever you are, go home tonight. Give one of your loved ones a big squeeze for me and just whisper in their ear that I said thank you for what you and your families do for us. And that's what I want to say. And then just be a better leader than I was. I hope that what I shared with you can sometimes, at least if you go home and can reflect and think that maybe when you're in the crucible, when you're in the fire, that you'll make some decisions that will be better than some of the ones that I made. So thank you. I turn it back to you. I appreciate the opportunity to be with you today.
Thanks so much. And now it's my pleasure to introduce the Senior Vice President of the Airlift Tanker Association, General Retired Chuck Johnson.
Hey, thank you. And General Rand, what an awesome opportunity we had to listen to a lot of your great life's lessons, if you will. And I got to say, when you talked about the two different rigs from two eras and how much they, one in 1948 used the word love, I think it's pretty obvious to all of us that you are a person that does speak from the heart and the real stories and not fairy tales. So God's blessings to you for sharing all that with you. And we owe you a tremendous thank you as a commander who loves the mission, but loves his airmen even more. There are many things I just kept shaking my head. Yeah, I wished I would have done that. I wished I would have done this. I'm also a big Vince Lombardi fan. When I speak, I do a lot of quotes from Coach Lombardi, an incredible coach and mentor of young men playing football. But interesting. It was way more than that once I got to know that a lot more than just the men he coached, but young men and women with all of his lessons that he's passed on to us. And I also want to say on second chances, I'm at my daughter's house, just had our first grandchild, so I am just loving it.
Congratulations, sir.
Yep, it's grandchildren and golf, etc. So thank you so much for being with us today. And I will also treasure the times of meeting with you when we're on active duty together, going back to B-52 re-engineering. And of course, when the ADTC commander, we're bringing on the T7. That is going to be a kick-ass trainer. And of course, our new tanker when she really gets out there operational. So I'll just close to just say, can't thank you enough for your integrity and your honesty and your service in sharing all these stories with us. And blessings to you in your new opportunity with Gary Sinise Foundation. What a noble endeavor that is also. So thank you, General Rand.
You're welcome, sir. Thank you for having me. To all of you, God bless you all. I appreciate your service.
You bet.
Thank you for joining us today. Remember, if you're not an ATA member, please consider joining at our website. And also come back on the 9th of April at 1300 Eastern Daylight Time to see the Air Mobility Command Chief Master Sergeant Brian Krzelnik, joining us to talk about leadership, take your questions. And with Chief K, you always know it's going to be a great time. So we hope to see you then. The views expressed in this presentation are those of the speaker and do not reflect the official policy or position of the United States Air Force, the Department of Defense, the United States government, or the Airlift Tanker Association. Please send comments and suggestions for future topics and guests to us at ata@atalink.org. Thanks again for joining us, and we hope to see you again on the 9th.